Beetle Ute builders that are considering putting a panel against the back wall. I did that video where I did the wood one. I'm doing another. And while I got all my measurements written out, I thought I would show you real quick. So basically it's just thin Luan. I mean, there really isn't much to it. There's a bunch of different materials you could use. Luan's cheap and easy to work with, so that's what I've been using. And this is the pre-primed bamboo type stuff. So anyway, use whatever material you like. The difference in the thickness may make a difference on your side panels, as will the amount of insulation that you put behind it. But basically, I'm cutting this 23.5 high. So that comes, the bottom is just about 1/4 inch off of the exhaust hump along the back wall there. And the top edge comes out even with the highest point of the bottom of the rear window surround, the fiberglass rear window surround. Okay. The total width of it is 57.5. If you have a sunroof car and you need room in here to run your drains, you may have to back this off just a little bit, but you can always cut more off, so I would start with 57.5. For the seat belt area there, like the seat belt sits right about here, so I come in 1.25 inches. Well, let me start here. Come up 4.5 from the bottom and then come in 1.25 inches. So this is really close to 55 from that edge to the matching edge on the other side. So come up 4.5, in 1.25 inches, and then I just take a 45 off there. This sits into the carpet a little bit, so it's not real critical. That sits behind the seat belt. So, all right, obviously I got to cut a whole bunch more off. This will end up being cut about 1.5 inches off that surface. So this is going to get cut right about in there. I haven't trimmed these yet. But you can see how this is not terribly critical. You have plenty of room to work that further up. But the snugger you have it, the more it just kind of naturally stays in place. So it's going to be something about like that, just to give you a rough idea. And if you watched my speaker video, that's why I run these speakers in as far as I can before hitting the inside wall of the bed. Right, that edge there is almost to that bulkhead, because right with the speaker cover on it, it still overlaps it a little bit. And down here at this corner, I'm going to have to trim that a little bit. See, I'm going to have to either trim the speaker cover or trim a little bit of the side panel. But that's why I like to run the speakers in as far as I can. All right, so again, here was my measurements. I've been asked a couple of times for these. So basically, you cut a sheet 57.5 by 23.5 tall. Right, then this bottom corner, you're going to come in 1.25 inches and up 4.5, and then just take out those 45 just to make getting it in and out easier. And the less points you have, the less you'll scuff stuff up working it into the car. You have to bow this to fit it in the car. And then I'm going to put a piece of 1-inch angle aluminum that will go across the top and then come down the front, and a few screws across it. This one I'm going to cover with material. So keep in mind on these measurements what kind of material you're going to cover it with. The thicker material, you may have to take another 1/8 off if you're going to wrap it around. So I'm going to cover this in foam, 45 all the edges, and then stretch vinyl across it. So I'll have the thickness of the vinyl yet, making this just a little bit bigger on all the different sides. So if you're using a real thick or doing leather or something fancy, you may have to bring those dimensions down just a little bit. And this is what my panel looks like when it's all covered. And I just have a speaker sitting in there to see. So you saw the panel I cut out. Then I glued 1/4 inch high density foam on. I like this stuff, it's waterproof and it's real firm, so then it gives this a real firm feeling. You could use a low density foam. You could even use old headliner. This is old headliner material. when you order the low density foam, it's basically the same stuff. I would recommend at least a quarter. I think this is 3/16, and that's okay. You're gonna put the vinyl over it anyway. The one problem with the high density foam is if there's crinkles, like you can see those crinkles in it there, sometimes that comes out as you glue the foam on, or you glue the covering on. So there you can see just a little bit of divot. That was a crease in the foam. But remember, this is mostly going to be covered. You're not going to be able to see that whole panel. So I glued on the foam, whichever you choose. I used weldwood, contact cement. I always have that stuff around, and I love that stuff. It never gives up in the heat. But you could use the spray type, or 3M 90, or even 70, probably the spray type. Then I put a light coat of the weldwood on, laid my, this is just vinyl that has a kind of carbon fiber print to it. You could use anything that you want. You could use fabric, you can use vinyl, you could make a really nice one out of leather. You could use real carbon fiber, that would look pretty sweet. You'd have to resin it then though. But anyway, stretch that on and then stapled it up on the back. Yeah, you just stretch it on and staple it down. But by putting the light coat of weldwood across the entire surface, you won't get those bubbles. Like if you push something in behind the seat and it rubs on here, it'll bubble up. So that's why I put a little bit of glue. You can get away without doing that just fine. I chose vinyl because it'll wear well behind the seats. You know, if I throw the spare back there, or a backpack, or gun case, or whatever that you throw behind your seats, tool bag. I'm always putting a greasy bag of tools back there. That'll wear well. I decided to use a pattern on it just because that makes it harder to clean. No, I'm kidding. It just adds some texture back there because it is a big panel with a lot of real estate. But the vinyl is pretty cheap, stretches a little bit, so you could pull it and staple it down, and it works pretty well. I like that 1/4" Luan, because then I can use 1/4" staples and they won't come through. You know, so if you use too long of staples, they're all poking up through. That's a novice move. I've done that before. So next thing is to get it in the car and then get a couple pictures of that. So this is actually in a different Ute, but this is what I do before I put the panel in. So the upper window surround, I put a good layer of rattle trap and roll it out real well. Do that on the aluminum wall, and then put, in this one, I'm using a waterproof 3/4" insulating foam. The thickness of foam you use, I've used a 1" also. That is what drives how far back that panel is gonna sit and how much you need to cut off on your lower B-pillar covers. So figure out that before you start trimming your lower B-pillars, right? So this is ready now for the rear panel to come sit in. And now we'll go back to the other car. So here's the panel installed in the car with the speakers. Of course, seatbelt's in the way there. And that's where you have that little bit of overlap, right, that I was talking about, why we're trying to mount this speaker as far towards the center of the car as you can reasonably, because you do have some overlap. Now if you go with a little bit smaller speakers, you'll have less overlap. In the one that I'm working on now, I used a 6" speaker, and it's actually a little bit small. This is a 6.5. So you have a little bit less overlap. It'd be really nice to bring it up, right, where there's that step here anyway, but then you run into the step side, because remember that the step side is back here, and you don't have the depth before you run into the fiberglass for the depth of a decent speaker. But I'll accept that. On this one, I'm still playing around with this one, with this edging, right, that goes on the lower B-pillar cover. I'm not sure if I like it or not. It's kind of dark in here, but there you can see that's just an edging with a rubber flange on it to try to kind of dress up that seam. it's not quite there. So still playing with that. Here you can see the raw edge. It'd be nice to cover that and dress this up a little bit. So I'm still playing with ideas of that. But you get the idea of where you're going and what we're trying to accomplish with this back wall. So the wall works out on this one. Instead of using the angle aluminum, I was kind of experimenting. This is actually stair tread for the edge of a stair, and then I painted it in the same color as the exterior of the car. Not sure if I like it or not. I've used just straight angle aluminum, but that's kind of a sharp corner. It just looks nice having a little bit of round here, having a little bit of shape, you know, a little bit of detail. Don't know yet, haven't decided for sure, still playing with it. But that gives you an idea of where to start and use your own ideas and come up with something even different.